Welcome, everybody. Happy Tuesday. I keep forgetting. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Welcome, everybody. Happy Tuesday afternoon. As always, we're just going to take the next few minutes to let everybody trickle in. And we're going to get started right at 2 o'clock on the dot. Welcome, everybody. Go ahead and let us know in the chat where you are joining us from today. Happy Tuesday. We're doing our webinar on Tuesday this week instead of Thursday because of Thanksgiving in the US this week. Are some of you off this week? Maybe you're off Thursday and Friday. We wanted to make sure you could still all be here, which is why we're here on a Tuesday afternoon, though it's really throwing me off. Welcome. Hi, Claire. Hi, Martha. Jan, thank you so much for joining us. Does anyone on here in the US have a vacation this week? I know some centers closed maybe for a full week. Some closed just for a couple days, maybe some none at all. Juliet, you do. That's awesome. Thanks for being here. Thursday and Friday off. Very nice. Well, I'm glad we're all here on this Tuesday together then. Welcome, everybody. If you're just popping in, my name is Maddie. I will be your host of today's webinar. We are talking about creating an inclusive learning environment in your classroom. Very, very important for all the children and the families that we work with on a daily basis. Welcome, everybody. We're just going to wait 2 more minutes. I want to let everybody who registered today to find their way onto the link, find a spot to settle in, and we'll get going right at 2 o'clock so we can maximize our full hour together. Again, if you've never met me before, my name is Maddie. Thank you so much for being here with us on this Tuesday afternoon. Lisa, you're closed all week. That's amazing. I hope you enjoy some time off. Very well deserved. 1 more minute, everybody. On the dot. So I'm going to go ahead and pause our music there and we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Happy Tuesday afternoon before a long weekend ahead for many of you. Thank you so much for being here today. Today, we are talking about creating an inclusive learning environment in your classroom. Very, very important. I'm really excited to dive into this with all of you. Before we get started, as always, a quick disclaimer. The content that we are sharing with you is not personalized legal or financial advice. So the goal today is for us to come together as a community so you can learn some really great tips, tricks, techniques, research, some helpful mindset shifts for your center, and you can bring those learnings back into your classrooms with your colleagues, family, whoever it may be. But if you are looking at making any big changes at your center, we do just want to make sure that you are consulting with the right people, such as a legal or a financial advisor. Before we get started, we are going to give a listen to our land acknowledgement.
Hi Mama acknowledges that our main headquarters is situated in Toronto, Ontario, on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Toronto itself is a word that originates from the Mohawk word takaranto, meaning the place in the water where the trees are standing. As participants and guests in today's webinar, we are coming together from many different places around the world. We encourage you to learn about and acknowledge the land from which you participate.
And we will now give a listen to our diversity and inclusion statement.
Hi Mama is committed to fostering an inclusive and welcoming environment for our employees, customers, and community. Hi Mama welcomes and celebrates individuals of all backgrounds, orientations, and identities. Our Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee aims to ensure we provide a safe environment for everyone to thrive while bringing their authentic selves to work. Our mission is to promote an inclusive workspace for all employees through education, discussion, and celebration of our differences. Embracing these differences while coming together with a common purpose is what makes our team extra special.
And a few housekeeping pieces before we get started. As always, we are recording today's session. So if for any reason at all you have to hop off early, you want to watch it again, you want to share it with your colleagues, your staff, it is being recorded and the recording will be going out early next week. We are also recording with the closed captions enabled. If you cannot see the closed captions on your screen right now, and you do need to utilize those for today's live session, please be sure to hit that CC tab on your side of the Zoom so you can make sure to have those on. Certificate for every single one of you on here for being here live today with us at the live webinar. You will be getting a certificate of participation and we'll be sending those out to you by early next week. So no need to worry if you don't see that certificate today or even tomorrow. We'll be getting those out to you as quickly as possible. And lastly, connection. If you're having any issues at all with your Zoom, we certainly hope you don't. But if you do have any issues, you're having a hard time hearing us, or you're having a hard time with the video, please do be sure to contact the support team at Zoom. They know their product the best. You can contact them at support.zoom.us. Nora has just put a link in the chat there as well. You can pull that out, save it for later for any reason at all you need it, though hopefully you won't at all. And a quick reminder, Hi Mama Academy. If you're interested in learning more about creating an inclusive learning environment in your classroom, we actually have a course on Hi Mama Academy that is called Teaching to All, Inclusive Teaching Practices. Very important. In this course, you will learn how to incorporate inclusivity into your teaching practices so you can create a better classroom environment for all children. In case you haven't heard of Hi Mama Academy at all, it's our brand new online platform designed to give early childhood educators on-demand access to professional development training. There are more than 60 hours of IASET accredited certified training courses in there, everything from tackling challenging conversations to microaggressions in early childhood. It is all in there. As an educator, I do know how hard it is to find time for professional development or find time to get all of your staff together for a professional development session. Hi Mama Academy makes it so much easier because your staff can do it on their own schedule, and they can also focus on the learning that is going to be the most impactful for them. Professional development doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all for all of your educators anymore. They can really pick the courses that are the most pertinent to them and their class. So super exciting. If you do want to learn more on the courses in there, Nora will post a link in the chat and you can access our free 7-day trial. So pop in, see what the courses look like, see how they work, see if they interest you or your educators. It's very, very exciting. And finally, your hosts. Again, if you've never met me before, my name is Maddie. I am a customer advocacy specialist here at Hi Mama. I'm also one of the registered early childhood educators we have here on the team, and I'm your host of our Hi Mama Helps webinar series. As always, I have my lovely co host Nora here with me today. Nora, how is everything going with you on this Tuesday?
Hey Maddie, everything's going great. I had a lovely, restful weekend with family and friends, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you on this Tuesday.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Nora. Nora will be on the chat there. So if you have any questions at all, Nora is in there with you. Though, if you do have any questions for our special guest today, do please be sure to use that Q&A button. If you put your questions in there, we will see them. If you put them in the chat, as you've probably seen so far today, the chat moves really, really quickly. So your questions could get lost, though we will do our best to pay attention to them in there. But your best bet, any questions at all, use that Q&A box. Okay, and finally, our special guest today, we have Kayla Warburton. Kayla, welcome, welcome. Thanks so much for being here with us today. How are you doing?
Thanks, Maddie. I'm doing really well. I'm very excited to be here today with everyone and excited to dive in. Yeah.
Amazing. Kayla, I'm so excited. Kayla, I'm going to go ahead and actually stop sharing my screen now. I don't want to take up any more of your time. So stage is yours. I am here if you need me though.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Maddie. I really appreciate it. Now, as we dive into things for today, there are going to be a few things that we want to take away from today, and I want to start the presentation by talking about what I hope we all kind of take away, but of course, take away whatever, whatever takeaway is best for you. But what I hope that we can all get from this would be, number one, the understanding that some children don't know what acceptance and support feel like. And as educators, we have the opportunity to change that, and that's pretty special. The next takeaway I hope that we can get from today is that teachings about gender and sexuality in the classroom are not teachings about sex education, and that's something that we'll dive into in a little bit as well. And the last takeaway that I have here is that it's really important that we work towards a space that is expecting of everyone rather than accommodating to each individual's needs. It can be embarrassing for a child to feel like they're being centered out and accommodated rather than just having been expected as their peers were. And this one's really important to me, so we'll definitely dive deeper into that as we get into things, okay? The first category here that I kind of wanted to, umbrella term that I wanted to start talking about is culture. So the culture of a school is greatly impacted by so many independent elements, and therefore creating a safe and respectful culture for everybody is certainly not an easy task. Tara Goldstein is a researcher and a professor at OISE, which is the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. And she wrote a book titled Teaching Gender and Sexuality at School, Letters to Teachers. And this book is the result of research that she did, where she did a study interviewing LGBTQ plus families in mostly TDSB, so Toronto District School Board, and some other Southern Ontario school boards. And these interviews, they discussed how the families felt in terms of not only representation at the school, but just in general, if identifying as LGBTQ plus parents or children or both impacted their school experiences, and in what way. So in the previous webinar that I hosted actually on creating an inclusive learning environment, we talked that you can certainly find in Hi Mama Academy, which Maddie was touching upon there, as well as all of the entire 2022 webinar series. So if you've missed any, they are all in Academy, as well as over 40 incredible, unique, accredited professional development courses. But in that webinar, we actually talked about inclusive space in a discussion that was centered around ability and race, among other things. So for today's focus about creating an inclusive space, it's going to be inspired by Tara Goldstein's work and focused on gender and sexuality. Though many suggestions and ideas are certainly applicable to most anti-oppressive planning, teaching, and discourse. So certainly not limited to one type of discussion. So, So as we dive into the next little slide here, WWPS. So what will the parents say? Something that as educators, we ask ourselves pretty frequently. One of the biggest fears that teachers have when they begin thinking about doing any type of anti-homophobia or anti-transphobia education work is that fear of parent opposition. So how can we address this concern and be able to comfortably and safely introduce any topic, in this case, gender and sexuality, but introduce any topic into our classrooms in a safe and welcoming way? Well, first off, it's important to have an ongoing dialogue with the parent community throughout the entire school year about all of the topics that you'll be discussing. And I say all because this should not be a warning to parents about certain content where we're putting negative connotations on it, but rather this should be an opportunity to share your curriculum plans with the parents and allow room for dialogue about and feedback in regards to all of the topics that are planned for discussion in the classroom. Now, you don't want to frame these topics as controversial rather than being what they are, which is inclusive of diversity, right? The second point here is know your support systems. And what I mean there is it's really important to know who supports you in the discussions you're having and who you can turn to for additional support and resources if you encounter any challenges. Knowing also any policies and rights that you have, such as equity policies that your school board might have that would support you and any of the work that you're doing. So it's really important that you keep in mind any policies that can help support you along the way as resources, and make sure that you have a good understanding of who's there to support you as well. The next one here is keeping in mind that, and this one's very important to me. I want to take a step back for a moment there and position myself as a member of the LGBTQ plus community with a child who will be entering, kindergarten next year. This one's really important for me, and I do hope it's something that as educators we can keep in mind that for some parents, education about and representation of the LGBTQ plus community is critical to their child's safety. And so I do hope that we can kind of take a moment and let that sink in, that regardless of any opinions or views that we may have on different topics, and I hope that regardless of any opinions or views that we can all be respectful about them. And number one, keep in mind that the child's safety is what we're talking about here, making sure that the children are not feeling bullied, are not feeling unwelcomed, that they're feeling safe in their schools. And for like I said, for some parents, education about these topics is so critical to that safety for their children. At the end of the day, it's about the kids, and some children don't know what acceptance and support feel like because throughout their experiences, they've likely experienced tolerance at best. So I hope that as educators, we can kind of come together and show them what support and acceptance feel like. Now, before we move on to the next slide, I want to pose something to you all. Kind of go with me for the roller coaster here if you want to, and certainly no need to participate if you don't want to. But throughout this, I want to keep in mind that we're constantly dealt different cards in life, if you will, right? We're kind of dealt different cards and we go with them. And so I want to, as a figure of speaking, of course, but I want to kind of go through this with a few different ideas and perspectives in mind. So cards might come up throughout the presentation, and I would just like you to keep those in mind as a possible lens to look at the content through, as if this was a card that you were dealt, okay? The first one here would be that you're 9 years old and you think you might have your first crush, and this person that you might have your first crush on is the same sex that you are. So as we dive into the next part of the discussion, I'd love for you to just periodically kind of think of the content we're discussing from this lens if you feel comfortable doing so, okay? So first and foremost, GSAs, gay straight alliances. So continuing that discussion of school culture, it's important to talk about GSAs. And these are
Kayla,
students, yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. It
No.
doesn't look like your slides are actually moving on our side of the
Oh,
screen.
I'm so sorry.
So I'm still seeing the WWPS.
Oh, okay. So thank you so much, Maddie. I appreciate that. Get back here. Let's just close it and redo it to make sure we can all see. Perfect. All right. Sorry about that, everyone. Thanks, Maddie. Are you able now to see the card?
Yeah, we got it. No
Okay,
worries at all, Kayla. Thank you.
awesome, perfect, thank you. So this is the card that I talked about, the card that you were dealt that I'm hoping we can take as a lens to the rest of the deck as we go forward. So here talking about those GSAs or gay straight alliances. Now, student clubs, these are student clubs that are created by teachers and or students with the intention of creating safer and more welcoming schools for the LGBTQ students and families. Now, there have been many alliance kind of name changes for inclusivity over time. So one of them would be GSOAs, so Gender and Sexual Orientation Alliance, or Queer Straight Alliance, or Rainbow Alliance. There are lots of different acronyms and names that have come up to be more inclusive in the alliances as well. Now, in her book, Professor Goldstein notes research that shows schools with a GSA by some name or another report lower levels of anti-LGBTQ plus harassment and bullying. And that's a really important point. And so I'd like to kind of pause here for a moment and put on the lens of that card that we talked about that you were previously dealt. So maybe you have this first crush and you don't really know if you want to tell your friends because you're not sure even what it means yourself, but you're walking down the hallway of your school and you see a sticker on the door and it's a rainbow sticker that reads Queer Straight Alliance. How does this make you feel seeing that sticker when you walk down the hall? And just kind of pause for a moment, because I think for me, it would make me feel relieved, like I wasn't alone, and like there might be someone behind that door that I could talk to, or someone that I was going to be able to just feel comfortable knowing at least that if I ever did want to talk, they were there. Now, continuing on to the opposite spectrum of GSAs would be bullying, right? So how much of bullying is the school's responsibility? And this is a frequented question that's often asked by educators. And if you're not clear about this answer to this question, this is a really good conversation for you to have with your boss and peers to make sure you're aligned as to how responsible you are about bullying with the students at your school. Now, in Tara's book, there is a letter to teachers from a parent whose child was bullied at school. And despite her conversation with the principal about this bullying, the problem was not being solved. So in this particular letter, the parent took things into her own hands and had a conversation after a workshop that she was hosting in a classroom. Now, again, this would not necessarily be my suggestion. That's what the parent chose, and it did work out for her in this particular instance. But this is just an example as to why educators' roles in preventing bullying is so crucial. One of the interviewees in the Tara's research said it really beautifully, so I'll just kind of quote them here. They say, "It is important to separate a bully's behavior from who they are as a person. A child who bullies needs to be told that they're a good person, but that their behavior needs to change. Bullies need to learn how to relate to people in new ways, and it's the job of educators to teach them those new skills." And I couldn't agree more. As educators, working in the field, we work really hard to teach so many skills and development, in development and social skills to children, and teaching them that when they're bullying, it's not that they're a bad person, just that they need to change their behavior is so, so important at the young age that many of us are dealing with the children we have. Now, what if the person who's bullying is the principal, or if the principal is not necessarily helping, right? Some children or parents might be concerned about bringing up matters of bullying when they feel that the principal is not on their side, or that the principal is potentially part of the problem. They might feel stuck, like there's no one else. And there are certainly trustees and MPs and other people that we can turn to in situations like this. So again, like I said in the beginning of the slides, be aware of who you have as a support system and who else there is there. But that's a lot of work to ask for someone to do, to go and look up all these people and find out how they can feel supported. So it's also important that's why the GSAs are so important, because as noted in the previous slide, having an alliance that supports staff and students and families of the LGBTQ plus community helps to reduce the amount of LGBTQ targeted bullying. So these can be the best place to start targeting that bullying from, and these alliances can be used as momentum to rally around hosting workshops and rallies and assemblies. So they can be used in many ways to create safer spaces in your school. The next section here is on allyship, and I think that kind of, we again already discussed that a little bit when we talked about creating the LGBTQ spaces such as GSAs. Now, every marginalized individual needs an ally. So how can we make allyship meaningful? So yes, putting rainbow stickers on classroom windows shows solidarity and allyship, but how can we take it a step further and be active allies? Well, it all starts with education, educating ourselves and not expecting others to do it for us. So think about that card that you were dealt as a 9-year-old, still so unsure of your sexuality. Should you be expected to explain it to others as well and tell them how to support you on this journey that is brand new and maybe confusing for you? Asking marginalized people to teach us how to be allies adds a weight to their shoulders when we mean to be taking some off. So how can you be an ally? Well, let's start with some vocabulary. And I think that's a good place to start, regardless of what the topic is, however we want to be an ally. Looking at the vocabulary used by the people who are being marginalized is a great place to start. So some educators might veer away from discussions of gender and sexuality because they just don't have the vocabulary, or understanding to discuss these topics in a way that might feel safe and comfortable for them. So the first place to start is understanding the language. In Tara Goldstein's book, there's actually a unicorn glossary that was written by Benjamin Lee Hicks. And they wrote this glossary to help fill the vocabulary gap for educators and everyone who wants to educate themselves on different terms that they may not be familiar with. So there's 2 terms that I have up here for you that are really important to distinguish between. The first being gender. So, and this definition is just from WebMD, that gender is a multifaceted social system. Gender is largely based on society and culture, and there are some consistencies, but it can be concluded that gender is not predetermined based on sex. Now, in the Unicorn Glossary, Benjamin has a wonderful definition for gender, and it includes a quote that reads, "Social ideas about gender stem from societal expectations of how a person should behave based on their sex." So arguably the most important determinant of gender is your gender identity. And this is the internal sense of self that states your gender. So regardless of the sex assigned at birth, some of the common gender identities are man, woman, transgender, non-binary, and genderqueer. So the next box there in the yellow is sex. And again, the WebMD definition first, which is that sex is generally determined at birth according to the baby's chromosomes, gonads, and anatomy. These 3 features are used to determine biological sex, typically male or female, though some people are not born into profiles that are defined by these 2 sexes. So back to the Unicorn Glossary, Benjamin notes that in reality, sex is a continuum. The majority of people exist somewhere close to one of the 2 ends of the continuum that we have named male and female, but there is also a vast middle space occupied by intersex persons. Now, what sex isn't sexuality. Okay, so it's easy to get lost in the weeds when discussing sex and gender, and it becomes even more complicated when sexuality is dropped in. But it doesn't need to be. Sexuality is divided into 3 elements: who you're attracted to, your sexual behaviors, and your identity. As with most things, descriptions of sexuality are vast and cannot be encompassed with a single binary. Sexuality takes into consideration your sex and your gender and the sex and gender of any partners. it's important to know that your sex doesn't predetermine your sexuality, and that your sexual behaviors or who you're attracted to, relationships, and personal identity are influenced by societal norms and social stigmas and different forces behind your sexuality. And then some of the common identifiers for sexuality or sexual orientation include gay, lesbian, queer, bisexual, and pansexual, and certainly not limited to that list. Now, as we continue with this discussion, I would like you to try another lens, if you don't mind going with me on that journey. So here is another card, and let's say this is the card that you were dealt. You are 8 years old and you don't feel like you in your body. You feel like maybe you're not meant to have been assigned the sex that you were. And as we dive into this section, I'd love for you to periodically think of the content from that lens if you feel comfortable doing so. So looking at gender at school, the two really important pieces here are teacher allyship and gender expression.
Hi,
So
Kayla.
yeah.
Me
Oh, is it
again.
not
I'm so
coming
sorry for
again?
interrupting. It doesn't seem to be moving again. I'm so sorry.
That is
There we
so
go.
strange. Oh,
You're good. It just flipped.
okay, sorry, I don't know why it's lagging there for us. So really quickly, there is the card that we showed where you are 8 years old and maybe you don't feel like you in your body, and that you may not have been assigned the sex that you were supposed to have been. So that being the lens that we'll kind of look at as we dive in. And it's continuing to move along there for us. I would hope. Sorry about that. Awesome. So teacher allyship and gender expression being the 2 points that we're talking about here. So first and foremost for teacher allyship, the number one point that I have here is let them be themselves. Adults tend to overcomplicate things, so it's really important to let children be themselves. Not all educators are ready or willing to support gender diverse students in their school. So it is crucial for those who are, ready and willing to have those discussions to be loud so that the children know that someone is there. For gender expression, you don't need to know everything about gender to allow your students the freedom of gender expression. You can support them in many ways, especially having reading materials that help them feel included and represented and give them age appropriate knowledge. So I have a few examples here. And again, if you're a member of Hi Mama Academy, I do have a course in there called Anti-Oppressive Education Practices in the Early Years, in which there are a lot of different resources for discussions on race, gender, and ability. So do take a look at those if you're looking for additional resources. But I pulled in 3 here that I thought would be great for this discussion. So, for different age groups, so children around maybe the grade 3 plus, this reading would be a great one for them. And it's called The Gender Book. It's actually a colorful comic style kind of book that focuses on unlearning and relearning what gender means. So Who You Are is an excellent book for students that are about 5 years old and up. And that one explores gender identity and socially constructed gender roles. And then for those of you familiar with Todd Parr, you may already have the family book in your classroom. This is a personal favorite for me that I would read to my preschoolers when I was in the classroom. And you can use this book to start a discussion about families and allow everyone the opportunity to feel that their family has been represented in the classroom. Bringing out that card that you were dealt. So let's say, that was the one where we talked about being 8 years old and feeling like you're not sure if you were assigned the right sex, just not feeling like you're you in your body and just feeling confused and unsure about what that means. So let's say that that's the card that you have. Now, how do you feel knowing that these materials are available to you and your classmates? Do you feel better if a teacher reads or discusses these materials? How does it make you feel knowing that they're accessible, as opposed to how you may have felt if there were nothing like this accessible in your classroom, right? So this is about making the kids feel safe to be themselves in a safer space. And what makes a space safer is not constant. So we must always work to keep our classrooms and our schools safe by having discussions and providing our students with adequate resources, and by always educating ourselves. Now, this slide here focuses on LGBTQ plus families in the school. And so we'll see here the top point being expecting everyone, going back to one of those takeaways that I was talking about at the beginning of the presentation. Something that I've learned over the years is that it's not enough to accommodate people. We need to work towards a space that is expecting of everyone. It can be really embarrassing for a child to feel centered out as accommodated rather than just being expected the way that their peers are. So bringing that back, that card that we were previously dealt, how would you feel if your school had a male washroom and a female washroom and you didn't feel comfortable in those washrooms? So to accommodate that, the school actually had an adult hall monitor take you to the staff washroom and wait in the hall for you every time you needed the facility. How does that accommodation make you feel? Right, and just kind of think on that for a moment, how, as a child who is going through all of these confusing feelings, how it might feel to have that as your accommodation. And then I'd like you to consider, what if that school actually had 3 washrooms, a male washroom, a female washroom, and an all gendered washroom? How would you feel then? Would you feel more expected, perhaps? And this is the difference between accommodation and expecting, right? Whereas in the first situation, you probably didn't feel like you were expected in this space. You probably felt like you could feel the accommodation. Whereas in the second one, you walk into a space and you knew that they knew you might be coming, right? And as a child, it must feel so special to walk into a space and feel like they knew you were coming. They knew you were going to be here. They expected you here. You're welcome and safe in this space, the same way that your peers are welcome and safe in this space. The next point here, Mother's Day and Father's Day. So actually, when I told people I was doing this discussion, this is something that came up quite often, where people were asking about Mother's Day and Father's Day, and asking if this was going to be something that was going to be discussed. So, sorry. What I have to say about it really at this point is just, I'm losing my slides on us. I want to take a moment and really just discuss the popular, Mother's Day and Father's Day cards and activities. First off, as a mother to a 3-year-old, Mother's Day gifts are very precious to me and they warm my heart. And I'm not about to tell you to stop making them, that's for sure. What I am going to ask of you is for you to ask queer couples what their preference is at these times of year and have an honest, possibly uncomfortable conversation with them. I know for me personally, if my child was in school and the teacher came up to me and said, hey, with Father's Day coming up, I know Tristan has 2 mothers. Is there someone in his life that he'd want to make a Father's Day card or gift for? I would say, yes, his father is very involved in his life. Whereas someone else might say, no, thank you for asking. And another might suggest a grandparent or a father figure. Who knows? We can't assume, but we do want to be conscious that this child has 2 mothers. So maybe on Mother's Day, they might want to make 2 gifts. I'm certainly not suggesting that we don't make gifts or cards. As a mother, there's something that I very much so look forward to, just making sure that we ask the questions to our families and don't make those assumptions. So intersectionalities. Now, this is a topic that we could have a whole webinar on. So for now, I will just kind of sum it up and say that most humans do not fit neatly into some pre-packaged box. Often there are many different parts of who we are that make us just that. So I may be queer and I'm also a woman. My son has, an LGBTQ parent, and he's also an interracial child. So those are intersectionalities that we both face, and those provide multiple opportunities for oppression to enter into our lives. And so those need to be considered both together and separately. Now, I spoke previously in a webinar about some examples with students with intersectionalities. And, for instance, take a child who has 2 dads and comes from a Muslim background and has brown skin. If they read a book about a child with white skin from a Christian background who has 2 dads, they might not feel as represented as you hoped they would when you brought in that material because the character had 2 dads like they do, right? So you thought that they could relate to this. Now, think about it from your perspective. Do you relate to every other human who has the same family structure as you do? Or are there other factors at play that help us feel represented? It doesn't come down to one attribute, which is why a variety of resources and materials is so important. The last point here is coming out and being outed. Again, something that could go on to talk about forever. So I just wanted really quickly on this point say that you should never assume someone's orientation or try to convince them that, if they do confide in you, you should never try and convince someone that they should come out, never try and convince someone that they need to say something. We should just be there as a support system, as someone who can listen and understand that not all families and cultures are accepting of the LGBTQ plus community, and that outing someone else could actually put them in harm's way and could do the opposite of creating a safe space. So the last section here is on action. And for this last section, I want to focus on action because, we've touched upon ways that we can actively create a more welcoming space for families and for everyone, but I just want to be sure to highlight them as we finish up the presentation. So to do so, I'd like you all to imagine a new final card that you've been dealt for this last section here. In this one, you have one younger sibling and two moms, and it's your first day of kindergarten. Okay, so looking at curriculum and lesson planning, this is the first and most important place that I would say we can start as educators to introduce topics and create a space that is inclusive. Now, as we discussed in the allyship section, creating that school culture that expects and accepts LGBTQ students and families means making sure that LGBTQ and other marginalized students see themselves represented in the curriculum in every single one of their classes. So what does this mean? It means that you don't just, toss one book in the book center and call it a day, that when you're doing math problems, you have characters in the math problems who have LGBTQ families, that when you discuss social issues, you make sure that a wide variety of social issues are discussed, that authors from materials are diverse, that role models that you discuss or have, depicted on walls for sports or theater are diverse in their, race, gender, sexuality. You want to make sure to have a diverse amount of perspectives, which is the next point there, having various perspectives. So having, the more perspectives, the better. Having guests come in that can speak, or maybe there's parents of children in the classroom that would like to come in and be a part of a discussion to add perspective. So making sure to include perspectives other than your own to be sure that all students and all people are feeling represented. And then inclusive material. So like the sample books that I provided earlier, having different craft supplies as well, such as I know when I worked as a preschool teacher, I like to always have rainbow stickers and papers that we could make rainbow collages if we wanted to. And then even decor in the classroom, having a pride flag up year round rather than just in June is a great way to show that you are inclusive and welcoming to all. And the last point there being listen to kids. So it's important that, if a child tells you something, that we're listening to them, we're not just shutting them off regardless of our opinions or views, that we take that opportunity to listen to the child so that they can feel heard. Okay, and as we kind of start to wrap up here, your next steps as educators and allies are to continue learning and unlearning and to take action when you can, to actively do what you can to make your classroom a safer space for everyone. And I know we've talked about a few different ways that we can do that. There are also some resources here, including the book that I discussed throughout this, Teaching Gender and Sexuality at School, Letters to Teachers. This is one of my absolute favorite reads. It is structured in a way that each section is a letter to educators from a parent or educator or someone in the community about different ways that we can be allies and take action. And again, in that is also the unicorn glossary, where you can explore different vocabulary to help you have these discussions in a safe and comfortable way for you and everybody else. And that is all from me, but we do want to hear from you. So I will hand it back over to Maddie.
Kayla, thank you so, so much for that amazing presentation. I had goosebumps. I had tears at some point. I really, really appreciate that presentation. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. I'm going to give you a moment to catch your breath. You can take a look in the chat and see all the big thank yous in there. As I go ahead and pull up my screen, we are going to quickly launch our poll out to the audience before we dive into the Q&A. There were quite a few questions that came in, so we'll do our best to get to all of them. And if we don't answer your question in the next 10 minutes or so, Just know that we will be sharing this recording. We'll be sharing contact information so you can continue to keep learning about this topic today, especially in Hi Mama Academy, where we do have more courses available. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I am really quickly going to launch our poll out to everybody today. As always, we do want to take this opportunity to hear from all of you on here with us. So a few things we're interested in. How are you currently documenting and observing children's social emotional development in your center today, in your classrooms? We're also curious to know if you are interested in learning more about Hi Mama Academy and how it really truly does put professional development right at your fingertips. So, for example, if today's presentation interests you or you want to keep learning about it, you want your educators to keep learning about it, you will want to learn more about Hi Mama Academy because there's a lot of great courses in there for you. And the last one here, as we continue to improve our webinars for you, what would you like to see more of? Do you want to see more audience participation? Did you like when we did panel discussion webinars? Do you want to see more of those? More take-home activities or resources after the webinar? Maybe you're curious about more statistics and industry trends, or maybe you want to learn more about childcare stories, anecdotes, hear from peers in your world. Let us know what you want to see more of, and we'll make sure to take that feedback away with us as we continue to do our Hi Mama Helps webinars. I am going to leave that up there. And Kayla, I'm going to go ahead and pull up some of these questions. Let me just grab them. Are you ready for a couple questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, amazing. So the first question that came in through from the audience today was, what should an educator do if a parent does not want their child discussing these topics and go so far as to say they will not let their child dress, if they're a boy, dress in a dress in the dress up station, or if they won't let their child play with dolls? How would you kind of handle that situation in the classroom? Speak to that parent.
Yeah, and, that's a really difficult situation as an educator to be in, and a situation that I've been in. Not from the parent, from a child actually who was in the classroom, and in that situation, we were in a drama center, and a boy had put on a dress, and the little girl was like, "Miss Kayla, what's going on? He's wearing a dress. He's wearing a dress," and was very concerned about it. And all I did was ask her why he couldn't wear the dress, and she wasn't quite sure. So, we talked about how it fit him. And so if it fit him and he felt good in it, why couldn't he wear it? And so speaking to a preschooler, she very quickly was like, yeah, that makes sense. Now I know speaking to parents is not as easy, and it doesn't have usually that quick reaction of, well, that makes sense, because we have an entire life of lived experiences and social constructs that are telling us other things. So to be honest, in that situation, I usually go to the support systems that I have and understand that you are protected by human rights and policies to make sure that we have these discussions. And it always goes back for me to the discussion that we are not talking about sex with your children. It is not sex education. We are talking about identity and making sure your conversations are age appropriate. I'm not asking you to go to toddlers or preschoolers and start, talking about, hey, what's your gender identity and what's your sex, but going to them and talking about, what does your family look like and how do we feel, and talking about representation from that point. And what I would say to that parent is, what I said in the very beginning of this, is that for some parents and for some of the other parents at this school, us having these conversations is how they know that their children are safe, right? That there are some children who won't be safe if these conversations aren't had. And that is something that's really, really important to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to touch on one thing, because this is actually something I thought of as well during your presentation. So you mentioned at the start there that the way you would acknowledge that for the child is you'd say, well, why can't they wear the dress, right? You get curious with them and you try and explore the situation with them. So the question I'd written down is, how would you respond to a child who perhaps said something homophobic to another child? So I'm curious if you have any more to say on that topic. Is there anything else you would say beyond why can't they do that, beyond getting curious with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to understand where they're coming from, and then to put things into a more like wholesome, like big picture, because again, these are children that we're talking about that don't have, they haven't had the chance to understand life and create. So we don't want to put ideas and, notions, but having them understand things from a big picture is how I like to go about the discussion. So saying things like, is it okay for someone to, for people to love each other no matter what color their skin is it okay for someone to love each other no matter whether it's two boys or two girls? I always talk about love in the way of like, what is love, and like having that conversation of love is two people who care about each other and want to be kind to each other. And it's okay for, two women to love about each other and want to be kind to each other, just the same way it's okay for two boys to love each other and want to be kind to each other. And having conversations like that is a really great way to start. And again, keeping it in just the topic of, what is love for a child? Children typically see love not in a sexual way. That's something that as adults we tend to do, is sexualize things for a child. Love typically means like someone who cares for you, someone who supports you. And that's what, the conversation that I would want to have with the children is that, you can be loving and caring and supporting towards anyone, regardless of their gender, sex, age, race, sexuality.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Kayla. Another question that came in from the audience here. Would a child 5 or under know that they feel different gender-wise at that age, or does that start to happen more in the elementary school years?
I think that that's a question that really can't be answered for everyone, right? Each individual kind of has their own feelings. I mean, one question that I always think of is like, well, when did I decide? And it's like, you don't. You didn't wake up one day and decide like, I'm going to be gay, or I'm going to be straight, or I'm going to be this. You just know that you feel a certain way, or however that is. And I think for some people, they may realize and know that at a young age, and they may realize or know that at an older age, and that's okay. No one needs to know 100% who they are from a young age. But absolutely, there are certainly, children who have, and adults who have expressed that when they were younger they knew something was different, but they weren't sure, necessarily what it was, just that they felt different. And often, I would say, in my opinion, often that's attributed to the social norms that we place on children, where we tell them, oh, you're a boy, you have to wear blue. And so when they don't like blue, they're confused about that, right? So it's really important that we stop putting those types of things on things and allow children to just be who they are, so that, they don't necessarily feel so extra confused by the additional binaries that we put on things, like saying that colors have a gender, or things like that, a girl toy and a boy toy, something that I've heard often. Those don't exist. I mean, my son playing with a doll just means that, when he's a father, maybe he'll have some really great habits towards being a father, if that's the path that he chooses, because, he learned to care for through drama at a young age. So there's a lot of positive things that come out of dramatic play, regardless of, you know, gender. You can get a lot of great things out of playing with dolls, regardless of your sex or gender.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kayla. This other question that came in, we touched on this a little bit, but I still want to ask this question because there are some different pieces to it. This is going back to the Mother's and Father's Days, like celebrating those in the classroom. So this question was, what if they have a family with two moms, two dads, and they say they're not comfortable with the class celebrating that day? How would we handle that?
Yeah, that's definitely a really tough one because, like I said, as a mother, I absolutely love, getting the Mother's Day gift and getting that appreciation. I think it would be dependent on the school culture as well. I know there are some classrooms and schools that would do things like having a Parents' Day where they celebrate Parents' Day rather than, having 2 days, Mother's Day and Father's Day. But I think, again, it comes to having a discussion with that parent and saying, thank you so much for your opinion. And we really want to be inclusive and welcoming to you and your families. And however, we can do that for your child. There are also other families here that we want to be welcoming and inclusive to. And, we're celebrating all of the mothers on this day and all of the fathers on that day. If you have ideas, and that's when you can kind of ask them, if you have ideas for other ways that you think we could do this, we could explore that with you. But I think it's really important to be transparent that we're trying to be inclusive of everyone. And that means, we're not just like, oh, okay, well, to be inclusive of you, we're going to change what we do for absolutely everyone. I don't think that that's the correct reaction necessarily, that maybe it's finding a common ground where everyone's feeling welcome.
Yeah. Absolutely. As we're going through this, Kayla, I'm wondering at your center and in your preschool classroom, did you and your colleagues sit down and talk through how to respond to these situations together? Or how did you build these solutions as a team?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So we had a lot of conversations when I entered the classroom space as a preschool teacher. There were certain terms sometimes that we would use, like the girl toys and boy toys, or saying, girls line up here and boys line up here. And that one was actually a really big one because I had having done gender studies when I achieved my Master of Education. One of the focuses for me being anti-oppressive education. And in that, speaking to other queer people who had said that when they were younger and were asked to stand in either a boy or girl line, but they were just confused at the time as to, where they should stand, that they felt silly and ridiculous. And for me, that was one of the first conversations that we had as educators in the preschool room, was trying to make sure our vocabulary wasn't, like being singling people out in that way. So instead we would say, hey, if you have short hair, line up over here, and long hair here. If you're wearing a polka dot shirt, come line up. If you're wearing stripes, line up over here. And use different ways, fun ways that were actually a lot more fun for the children to choose how they would line up by. And instead of saying hey guys, saying hey everyone, and just being as inclusive as possible with language, because again, regardless of our views or our lived experiences, none of us know what these children are feeling or experiencing, and we just want to make sure that it's a safe space for them. That's at the end of the day what it comes down to. We're not trying to change things for everyone. We're not trying to step on people's toes in the sense that we're like, oh no, we want you to do these things that you're not comfortable with. I don't want anyone to do anything that they're not comfortable with. I just want to keep the safety of the children at the forefront.
Absolutely. Kayla, thank you so much. I have one more quick question before we wrap up. I pulled this one out of the chat. It must be a toddler educator we have on here with us, and they were asking, how do we start teaching this to toddlers? Which got me to start thinking, do you think the best way to have these conversations with toddlers is direct teaching instruction, or is it modeling and passive instruction as we have these conversations come up naturally? Is it a combination of both? How would you respond to that question?
Yeah, I think again, going back to just having representative materials, where we have, diverse people on the posters in our walls, making sure that some of the authors of our books are, LGBTQ authors or authors of other races, making sure that there's representation in our books. So, we read a book where, there's a family with a mom and a dad. And the next day we read a book where the family has two moms or two dads. And the next day we read a book where it's a single parent family or an adopted family, and make sure that we just are reading about all different types of family structures and including that in our content. I don't think that at the age of toddler, where there's so much going on developmentally for them, we need to add topics of discussion that even as adults can be very challenging discussions to have. That I don't think that that's the answer for a toddler, that rather it's like you said about modeling and making sure that there's representation for them.
Amazing. Kayla, thank you so, so much for coming here and having this conversation with us today. There have been some absolutely amazing comments and thank yous in the chat. And I know this is such an important topic to help all the children that everyone on here is caring for feel safe in their classroom. So, Kayla, thank you for being here and sharing this with us and having this conversation with us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to everyone for sharing your thoughts and opinions in the chat. I genuinely appreciate all of them.
Amazing. Kayla, thank you so much. Take care. Before we quickly wrap up, everybody, just a quick reminder that the giveaway today is that amazing resource Kayla was just talking to us about, teaching gender and sexuality at school, letters to teachers. So keep an eye out in your inbox for that show notes email. We will be announcing the winner in there, so you can have this amazing resource to help you continue your learning. Quick reminder, the show notes email, so with the announcing the winner of the gift, the recording, certificates, will all go out early next week. So keep an eye out in your inbox for all of that. Make sure you check your spam, your junk, promotions, socials. There's so many folders now that things hide in. So just make sure you're looking in those folders if you can't find the email. If you are the winner of the giveaway, we will contact you directly. And before we wrap up, I just want to announce that our next webinar is in 2 weeks. We are taking a break next week for the first time in 136 weeks of webinars. We will not be here next Thursday. So make sure to be here the following Thursday, December 8th. Same time, same place, 2:00. You can register for that webinar now. I certainly hope to see you all there. We're going to be talking about unlearning biases, about ADHD in early childhood education. I am really, really excited about this webinar, but I just want to make sure we hit home that there will not be a webinar next Thursday, but it will be the following Thursday. So I certainly hope to see you all there. And I hope you all enjoy your long weekends as well. And last reminder, if you haven't connected with us yet, please do. Circle Time for Early Childhood Educators, our Facebook group, has hundreds of educators in there sharing ideas, tips, tricks. It's a really great community. And if you want to see updates and upcoming webinars and events at Hi Mama, just make sure to follow us on Instagram. Otherwise, thank you so much to all of you for being here for this really important conversation to help create safe classrooms for all the children you care for. For those of you who are in the US who celebrate Thanksgiving, I hope you have a great long weekend. And otherwise, we will see all of you in 2 weeks. Thanks so much for being here. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.